This show is part of OnePlace, a daily network of focused briefings across the stories people follow most.
Welcome to today's roundup. We are covering a chaotic night in Washington and major shifts in international diplomacy. Let's get right into the headlines that are shaping the conversation today.
Gunfire erupted at the White House Correspondents' dinner tonight.
A suspect is in custody following the hotel shooting.
Trump shared footage of the suspect at the dinner.
Eyewitnesses describe the terrifying moments under the tables.
The U.S. abruptly pulled out of Iran peace talks.
John Fetterman doubles down on his support for Israel.
RFK Jr. faces new restrictions on his health agenda.
Trump cancels the envoy trip to Pakistan for talks.
First, the Washington shooting.
The White House Correspondents' Dinner is usually a night of jokes and high-profile networking, but this year it turned into a scene of absolute chaos. Gunfire was heard inside the Washington Hilton ballroom, forcing some of the most powerful people in the country to dive for cover. President Trump was immediately rushed from the room by his security detail as the situation unfolded. We are learning that the suspect has been identified as 31-year-old Cole Tomas Allen from Torrance, California. He was apprehended at the scene and is expected to be formally charged in court this coming Monday. It is a chilling reminder of the security risks present even at the most heavily guarded events in the nation's capital. One security agent was injured during the encounter and had to be taken to a local hospital for treatment, though authorities say the situation was eventually contained.
The images coming out of the Hilton are truly startling. You see diplomats, journalists, and politicians huddled under tables draped in white linens, a stark contrast to the formal attire they were wearing for the gala. The Secret Service acted with incredible speed to secure the president and the First Lady, who were both on the main stage when the first sounds of gunfire echoed through the hall. While the ballroom itself is a massive space, the proximity of the threat created a wave of panic that spread through the hundreds of guests in attendance. Law enforcement officials have been working through the night to process the scene and gather evidence. This event is one of the biggest social fixtures in D.C., and the fact that a suspect could get close enough to discharge a weapon has raised immediate and serious questions about the perimeter security protocols for the evening.
Now for the suspect.
The U.S. Secret Service has confirmed that the suspect is in custody and that both President Trump and the First Lady are uninjured. In a statement following the incident, the president noted that a Secret Service agent is doing great after being hit in their bulletproof vest. The shooting reportedly took place at a security screening area near the entrance to the main ballroom. This is a critical detail because it suggests the suspect was stopped before they could enter the most crowded part of the venue. Metropolitan Police Chief Jeffrey Carroll revealed that the suspect was heavily armed, carrying a shotgun, a handgun, and multiple knives. Law enforcement believes the suspect may have been a guest at the hotel, which would explain how he was able to be inside the building. He is currently facing charges of using a firearm during a crime of violence and assault on a federal officer.
The scene was described as incredibly chaotic, with reporters hearing shots around 8:30 in the evening. Video from the room shows security clearing the stage while someone can be heard shouting for everyone to stay down. Despite the danger, President Trump took to social media shortly after being evacuated to praise the bravery of the law enforcement officers on site. He even initially suggested that the show should go on, though he ultimately deferred to the judgment of the Secret Service. Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche has indicated that more charges are likely as the investigation continues. The suspect is currently being evaluated at a local hospital, though he was not hit by any return fire from the officers. The focus now shifts to how a man with multiple weapons managed to navigate the security layers of such a high-profile event, even if he was a guest at the hotel.
Next, the shared footage.
President Trump has been very active on Truth Social since the incident, sharing both video footage and photos of the suspect. One video shows a blur of a man attempting to barrel past a security checkpoint near the magnetometers at the Washington Hilton. It captures the frantic moment law enforcement officers reacted to the intruder. Trump also posted a photo of the suspect lying shirtless on the ground with his hands restrained. During a press conference at the White House, the president described the suspect as a very sick person and confirmed that law enforcement had already searched the man's apartment. He used the moment to highlight the effectiveness of the Secret Service's equipment, specifically mentioning the agent whose vest saved him from serious injury. Trump appeared resilient, even joking with reporters that the multiple attempts on his life haven't turned him into a basket case, though the gravity of the situation was clear.
Interestingly, the president also used this event to advocate for a new White House ballroom. He claimed that the military has been asking for a more secure facility for over a century and a half. Trump described his vision for a drone-proof and bulletproof glass structure that would provide levels of security that no one has ever seen before. It is a classic Trump move to pivot from a security crisis to a major construction project. He emphasized that the current venues, like the Hilton, simply cannot provide the necessary protection for modern threats. While the investigation into the California man continues, the president is clearly focused on the broader implications for his safety and the safety of his administration. The footage he shared has already gone viral, providing a first-hand look at the split-second decisions made by the agents on the ground, who prevented a much larger tragedy from occurring in that ballroom.
Now, the eyewitness accounts.
We have some harrowing accounts from inside the room. One reporter, who is blind, described the experience of hearing the low thudding sounds of semi-automatic weapons and the shattering of glass. He felt his colleague dive for the floor and followed suit, huddling under a tablecloth. For several minutes, the thousands of guests in the room were left wondering if a gunman was about to enter the main ballroom and open fire on the crowd. The atmosphere was thick with fear as people watched the Secret Service rush the president, Melania Trump, and J.D. Vance away from the stage. Other agents stood with guns trained on the crowd, searching for any additional threats. It was a starkly different experience from previous incidents, like the one in Butler, Pennsylvania, because the guests were trapped in a confined space, unsure of where the danger was coming from or if it was over.
The reporter also noted seeing high-ranking officials like FBI Director Kash Patel on the floor, shielding his girlfriend while a Secret Service agent ran to assist them. Just moments before the shooting, the reporter had spoken with Health Secretary RFK Jr., who was seated nearby. The sudden transition from a formal dinner to a life-threatening emergency left everyone shaken. There are now serious questions being asked about the security at the venue itself. While the roads around the Hilton were closed, some attendees felt the internal security wasn't particularly heavy. The fact that the suspect was reportedly a guest at the hotel adds a layer of complexity to the security failure. How can law enforcement effectively screen everyone in a massive hotel while still maintaining a secure perimeter for the president? This is the question that will likely dominate the after-action reports as the D.C. community processes the events of this terrifying Saturday night.
Moving to international news.
In a major diplomatic shift, President Trump has abruptly canceled a planned trip for U.S. representatives to attend peace talks with Iran in Islamabad. The delegation, which was supposed to include Special Envoy Steve Witkoff and the president's son-in-law Jared Kushner, was intended to negotiate an end to the ongoing conflict. However, Trump stated that the travel time was simply too long and expensive, suggesting that the two nations could just as easily negotiate over the phone. He told reporters that he didn't want his team spending 17 hours on a plane when a phone call would suffice. This decision comes despite the fact that the war, which Trump once suggested would only last 6 weeks, continues to drag on. The president seems to believe that this blunt approach will force Iran's hand, claiming that shortly after he canceled the meeting, Iran returned with a better offer, though no formal deal has been reached yet.
This move has left many wondering about the future of the ceasefire, which the president recently extended. Vice President J.D. Vance was also originally slated to travel for these negotiations, but those plans fell through as well. The White House continues to insist that they are making progress, but the cancellation of face-to-face talks is seen by many as a setback. Trump's rhetoric suggests he feels the U.S. holds all the leverage, famously posting that the U.S. has all the cards while Iran has none. Critics argue that skipping these high-level meetings in Pakistan, which is acting as a mediator, could signal a lack of serious commitment to a diplomatic resolution. Meanwhile, the situation on the ground remains tense, and the global community is watching closely to see if this phone call diplomacy can actually produce the results the administration is promising, or if it will lead to further escalation.
Next, Senator Fetterman's stance.
Senator John Fetterman is making waves again for his unwavering support of Israel and his alignment with President Trump's stance on Iran. During a recent appearance on CNN, Fetterman expressed total indifference to his falling approval ratings among Democratic voters. He argued that the war with Iran affects everyone who consumes oil, noting that the closure of the Strait of Hormuz threatens a global energy crisis. Fetterman has become a polarizing figure within his own party, being the only Democratic senator to vote against a war powers resolution that sought to limit Trump's military actions. When asked if his support for Israel was a hill he was willing to die on, he responded with a firm yes. He stated that he cannot sit quietly or say things he doesn't believe just to satisfy the polls, even as Israel becomes more toxic in the eyes of some voters.
Fetterman's position is particularly notable because he continues to support Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu despite accusations of war crimes from the International Criminal Court. He has also refused to use the term genocide regarding the situation in Gaza, a term many humanitarian organizations have adopted. His stance has led to a significant rift with other Pennsylvania Democrats, with reports suggesting that many in the House are unwilling to back him for re-election. However, Fetterman seems emboldened by his outlier status, leaning into his support for the administration's foreign policy. He pointed out that the U.S. military actions were launched at the request of Israel, a point that even Secretary of State Marco Rubio has discussed. For Fetterman, the issue is about principle over politics, and he appears ready to face the electoral consequences of his staunchly pro-Israel and pro-interventionist views in the Middle East.
Now, RFK Jr.'s role.
A year ago, Donald Trump promised to let Robert F. Kennedy Jr. run wild on health policy, but the reality of his tenure at the Department of Health and Human Services has been much more restrained. Kennedy, who led the Make America Healthy Again movement, brought a unique coalition of supporters to Trump's side, including those concerned with vaccine safety and nutrition. However, recent congressional hearings have exposed cracks in this alliance. Kennedy was grilled by lawmakers over his support for a Trump executive order that increased the production of glyphosate, a herbicide his own base has long campaigned against due to cancer concerns. When pressed by Senator Brian Schatz, Kennedy admitted he had expressed his displeasure to the president but ultimately deferred to Trump's claim that the order was necessary for national security. This has left many of his supporters feeling confused and betrayed by the lack of independent action.
It appears that Kennedy's authority at HHS is more limited than many expected. Some observers describe him more as a spokesperson than a policy driver, meaning the radical changes he promised are coming much slower than his base hoped. Republican strategists are also concerned that by reining in Kennedy, Trump might be missing a chance to connect with a broader electorate on less controversial health goals. Kennedy's favorability is tied to his image as an outsider willing to take on the establishment, but his current role requires him to defend administration policies that often contradict his long-held positions. As he tries to navigate the bureaucracy of Washington, the tension between his personal agenda and the president's priorities is becoming more visible. Whether he can still deliver on the core promises of the MAHA movement while working within the constraints of the Trump administration remains a major question for his followers.
Finally, the Pakistan talks.
The cancellation of the U.S. envoy trip to Pakistan has added a new layer of uncertainty to the Iran conflict. President Trump's decision to call off the visit by Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner came just after the Iranian delegation had left Islamabad. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi expressed skepticism about whether the U.S. is truly serious about diplomacy, noting that while Iran has shared its position on ending the war, they have yet to see a reciprocal commitment. The standoff remains centered on the Strait of Hormuz, a vital shipping route for the world's oil supply. The U.S. has increased its naval presence there to block Iranian exports, while Iran has restricted passage in response to U.S. and Israeli strikes. Trump's social media posts suggest he believes Iran is in a state of internal confusion, claiming that nobody in their leadership knows who is in charge.
Despite the canceled trip, Trump has maintained that the ceasefire will hold for now. When asked if the lack of face-to-face talks meant the war would resume, he told reporters that the administration hasn't thought about that yet. This casual approach to such a high-stakes conflict is characteristic of Trump's negotiating style, but it leaves mediators like Pakistan in a difficult position. Vice President J.D. Vance, who led the first round of talks, was reportedly on standby to join if progress was made, but his absence from the initial plan for this round suggested that expectations were already low. Iran's president has stated that while they remain open to talks, the U.S. blockade and threats are the main obstacles to any genuine negotiation. As the diplomatic efforts stalled, the risk of renewed hostilities remains a constant concern for the region and the global energy market.
That wraps up our briefing for today. Thank you for joining us for this roundup of the latest news. We will be back tomorrow with another update on the stories you follow most.